Okay, Feats Guide. To knock this out of the park in a timely manner and definitely not get discouraged and lose the motivation to make videos for 8 months. Okay, though, so Feats, that's a fun one, okay. Okay, so what you're going to want to do is go Druid for your base class and Centaur for your race. Centaur gets you the maximum number of feet at level 1, that being 4, and at level 2, you get the pinnacle of feet optimization with the Druid's ability Wild Shape, giving you the ability to turn into a giant centipede twice per short rest. 100 feet right there. Now that is maximum foot power. Yeah? What's up? Oh, it's supposed to be feats like the optional abilities available as exchanges for ASIs. Okay, yeah, I guess we can talk about that. I guess we don't need this. Okay, so what are we left with? Oh. So, this analysis / defense is going to be divided into two parts. First, me looking at the feat design in general in 5e and many people's perceived problems with it. Then I want to go over some of the most misunderstood, unappreciated, or underestimated feats in 5e and give my hot take on why they are surprisingly viable choices. So, let's go over to the 3 most common criticisms aimed at feats and see how we address them. 1. You get feats too infrequently, and if you choose to get your primary ability scored at 20, as most people do, they seem even more infrequent. 2. Feat taxes. There are feats that are felt like they are required to play certain playstyles, limiting your feat options even further. And 3. Many of the feats are underpowered, making it so that when you do have a free feat and have a chance to have a choice, it feels like there are even less options. Too infrequent of feats. So first off, let's get this out of the way. Yes, in fact, feats are technically listed as an optional rule. You don't really need them in your game, particularly if you have a decent amount of magic items. However, they're easily the most commonly used optional rule, as feats allow for your character to feel a bit more your own, as they are one of the few dynamic choices you get to make in character progression in 5e besides your race, class, and subclass. Also, they're fun. As you play the game, you have ASIs every 4 levels, so that means if you did standard array without any sort of bonus to your primary stat, and want to get your primary stat to 20, as is the usual, the first chance you're going to have to take a feat is at level 12, with that being a feat that gives you a +1 to your primary stat. Well, honestly, that does feel like it sucks a bit. You have to wait until you're more than halfway through character progression to have any sort of choice, and even that is limited. Now, this is balanced in some ways. There are many of the more powerful feats are far more useful when you're higher levels. The -5 to accuracy on Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter don't affect you as much at higher levels, and when you have more strategy / higher to hit bonuses. Resilience and Warcaster both start pulling their weight much more as you level up, so that's at least something. But you know, the naysayers are right on this. It sucks to have to wait so long to have any sort of options with your ASI feats. Oh wait, but you know a little secret? Not many people seem to know about feats. Yep. Honestly, people never seem to notice there are other ways of acquiring feats other than ASIs. Now, there is the one other method everyone knows about, which is the starting feats you get from choosing variant human or custom lineage from Tasha's. You also have many people who swear by starting campaigns with a free level 1 feat, sometimes non-combat or racial feats to prevent min-maxers. This is homebrew, and I want to keep this video raw. And now, there is one other completely raw option that I never see brought up or mentioned when people are complaining about the lack of feats in 5e. Well, on page 231 in the good old Dungeon Master's Guide, under the Other Rewards section of Chapter 7, Treasures, you will find the reward known as Training. A character who agrees to training as a reward must spend downtime with the trainer. In exchange, the character is guaranteed to receive a special benefit. Possible training benefits include the following. The character gains inspiration daily at dawn for 1d4 plus 6 days. The character gains proficiency in a skill. Or the character gains a feat. Yeah, it's as simple as that. I've rarely met a game that has implemented this rule instead of some homebrew method, but there are literal instructions for how players might earn extra feats straight out of the DMG. That's as core raw as it gets. You save a city from an ogre attack, and the court wizard might accept your desire to learn how to make your fire magic pierce defenses by you gaining the elemental adept feat. The hunter or expert archer of a battalion of soldiers you help out might just teach you how to become a sharpshooter as an alternative to gold. If you're open to homebrew, I'm a fan of technique tomes that function as training manuals in the same way ability score improvement tomes do. allows the players to learn the feats a bit more at their own schedule. That's homebrew. I'm trying to keep this as raw as I can. The point is, if you don't have enough feats in your game, that's not because 5e design is lacking them. You guys are just not using the tools that are designed to put more feats into your game. So, the next common complaint you have of 5e design is the concept of feat taxes. And I think this is one of the biggest misnomers. When people say feat taxes, what they're actually referring to are the feats that are so useful for a kind of playstyle that your character feels lacking without it. It feels as though those feats require to be taken, as opposed to being an option. However, it was more commonly used back in the days of 3.5/Pathfinder and was a term for the kinds of feats you had to take, despite them providing little to no advantage for you, because they are prerequisites for more powerful feats you plan on taking. The prime example of this is the Pathfinder feat, Point Blank Shot. This feat, which all it does is give you a literal +1 hit and damage when using ranged weapons up close, is a requirement for so many of the more powerful or impressive feats: Far Shot, Precise Shot, Rapid Shot, Shot on the Run. So you take it because you have to, in order to get to better things, and are out one feat. And that's what I believe a feat tax is. But, back to 5e. Great Weapon Master, Polearm Master, Sharpshooter, Warcaster, yes, they are great feats, but they definitely aren't requirements, and there are other options you can take. If you're using a glaive, you can choose Polearm Master if you value using your reach, but Great Weapon Master if you want the chance to dish out extra damage. Or hell, you can realize that combat is only one aspect of the gameplay triangle, and you could take something like Ritual Caster instead for the utility. If you're a caster, you don't have to take Warcaster. You could take Resilient, you could take Lucky, you could even just not focus on concentration spells, or take Mobile to better keep yourself out of harm's way and make the concentration saves less. The point is this: obviously, there are always going to be optimal feats/mechanics for certain playstyles, but you are choosing to take those options, and then you often miss out on a larger variety of skills, utility, or other out-of-combat options because of it, because you're focusing your skill set down to one specific option. Not to mention, as stated in the previous criticisms, yes, as stated before, having more than just ASI feats in your game is completely raw, and gives you a lot more opportunities to try out the non-optimal combat feats. Alright, so I get it. You understand D&D is more than just a combat simulator, and as a role-playing game, not every ability or feat taken has to serve maximum combat potential. However, you still will prioritize, often only taking, combat feats because, well, it's the part of the game where you're at risk of dying. And a dead character doesn't get to use the non-combat feats they took. Yes, the actor feat does not keep you from dying as well as Resilient or Tough Might. However, this falls on the burden of the DMs. Feats like Actor, Linguist, and Dungeon Delver are often only underutilized because the social and exploration portions of the gameplay triangle are underutilized. Though I will say, there is another method of making sure players don't feel punished for taking a non-optimal or more flavorful feat. Yes, once again, as previously stated, having more than just ASI feats is perfectly raw and allows you the opportunity to take feats that aren't as often utilized, since you will have more than enough feats to finish your combat build. So, having addressed much of the concerns with the current system, I do feel like I need to say, the feat system is obviously not perfect. The fact that feats aren't optional to begin with baffles my mind. And when they eventually bring out 5.5e in a few years, I hope they give additional structure options, and honestly, I would love for them to separate the progression structure of feats and ability score improvements. But that would require a complete rework of the current system. Along with this, I hope they start bringing in more racial feats, as it seems they have abandoned this idea largely since Xanathars. Many of the ones we have are quite flavorful and are a good way of making your race feel like an impactful part of your character. Look, I understand feats aren't perfect. I just want to address some of the problems I hear constantly complained about that are so easily fixed at a table with completely core/raw rules. Now, I want to take the second half of this video to talk about some of what I believe are the most underappreciated feats in the game. Now, with the exception of one, these aren't the up-and-ready best feats in the game, maybe, but they are solid choices nonetheless and get a lot more crap than I think they deserve. Alright, first up is Mountain Combat. Now forget the fact this feat completely solves the whole "your mount is squishier than you and has low AC" problem. Let's take a look at that first ability. Holy Candlekeep Mysteries, that is near permanent advantage on anything smaller than your mount. First off, most regular mounts you have are going to be large, so that gives you advantage on medium creatures, which is the vast majority of any humanoids and many other creatures you'll be fighting. But let's go take a look at the mounts and vehicles section of 5e. 200 gold. That is all it costs to have a mount-trained elephant. A huge creature, that means you'll have advantage on everything, from trolls to beholders. And that's just raw amounts. Depending on your campaign, who knows what you can encounter now. This feat is great on any character that gets some pretty good AC. I'm talking your fighters, your rangers, hell even some barbarians, if you don't want a reckless attack all the time. But there's one class that makes this feat top tier. Paladin. Not only do you have access to some of the best armor in the game to let you tank for your mount, not only do you have an aura that boosts the saving throws of your mount, not only does the advantage on attacks mean you'll be critting smites left and right, but most importantly, are these two little things right here. Because these spells ensure that if you have time for a short rest, you have time to get your steed from wherever they may be. Solves all the logistical problems that can occur when having trouble bringing your steed to inconvenient places. The most common criticism of mounted combat. And even better, when you get fine greater steed, you got yourself a flying mount whenever you need it. Now I will admit this one is conditional. This entirely depends on what kind of campaign you're in. If you're playing Descent into Avernus and you're going to be fighting fiends left and right, then yeah, this feat is pretty useless. However, despite the many monsters in the monster manual who are immune to poison, just because there are so many immune to poison doesn't mean you're going to be fighting those as often in your campaign. I know so many campaigns where the most common enemy fought are often humanoids, whether they be soldiers, cultists, or even monstrous races. And guess what they don't have? Poison immunity. So, if you have a rogue or fighter and want to have the option of dealing a bit of extra damage when you need to, for just a bonus action, this feat is fantastic. Something to be noted though is not only do you get the fairly decent base 2d6 poison that comes with the feat, but 5e already has a good amount of poisons with listed prices already. Now obviously the big ones, Wyvern and Purple Worm, are a bit expensive, but I mean, 5e already has the problem of giving you nothing to spend money on, so why not buy some poisons for when you need them? Along with this, but a lesser known thing about poisons, you can just harvest them from any creature that has them. Not really, page 258 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. All it takes is a dead or incapacitated creature, 1d6 minutes, and a DC 20 nature or poisoner's kit check. And bingo, bango, bongo, you got yourself a vial of Tlenkali, Yanti, or hell, even Guardian Naga poison. Okay, now obviously this is a feat that needs to be reserved for a charisma-based character. Now it may seem simple, but take a look at what this feat actually does. It provides up to 6 people with around 1 to 2 extra levels of health, and you can get that health back every short and long rest. If your party doesn't have already a crap ton of methods of getting temp HP, looking at you, Twilight Cleric, this is an amazing feat to keep your party up and conscious. Seriously, this is like taking the tough feat and being able to give it to 5 other people as well. I don't know how it's slept on so often. The only downside I can think of is if your DM actually makes you give a literal 10-minute speech every time you want to use it. In which case, I hope you like hearing your own voice as much as I do. Look, it's hard enough being a sorcerer as is. You know so few spells and you have to balance combat and utility. You don't always have the luxury of being able to pack a couple damage varieties. You want to make sure your fireball keeps its impact when you need to bomb that Balgura. You want to not worry when you immolate that incubus. To be fearless, firestorming the Froghemoth. Yes, it doesn't help with immunities, but if you find yourself specializing in one kind of damage, this is sure to help you out. Now, all these other feats have been mostly conditional based on the campaign. They're good feats, solid, I love them and wish they were used more, but I wouldn't put them as one of the best feats in the game. Except for this one, Ritual Caster. The most underappreciated feat in the game. First off, Ritual Casting is an amazing feature, providing boundless utility at the cost of only 10 minutes. And this feat isn't even restricted to casters. Your decent end fighter or your monk can pick up this feat and become a bastion of utility. If you don't have a wizard in the party already, the only caster who doesn't have to prepare or know their ritual spells, this feat does so much for your party. Let's just take a look. Alarm, Find Familiar, Detect Magic, Comprehend Language, Identify, General Pose, Augury. Those are just the first 2 levels of spells, and you've already got all those bangers at your disposal without costing a single spell slot. And this isn't even looking up to the higher levels for stuff like Water Breathing, Tiny Hut, and Divination. And if you're a sorcerer, this feat is a must-have. It frees up so many of your preciously limited spells known, so you can rely on this for the typically required utility like Water Breathing, Identify, and Detect Magic. And keep your spells known to the fun stuff. Taking this one feat is the equivalent of taking like 5 or 6 Warlock invocations. Ritual Casting is like 90% of what makes Pact of the Tome a viable option. I never see anyone talking about this feat or recommend taking it. Not to mention multi-classing, since this feat scales off of character level, not caster level. No matter how you multi-class, or if your character is a half-caster, if you are character level 10, you can add level 5 spells to your ritual book. The sheer utility provided and the raw resources given easily make this a contender for top feat in my book. But that about wraps it up for me. But what about you? Do you agree with my thoughts? Think other feats are underrated or have other bones to pick with the 5e feat system? Feel free to let me know. Whether you agree or disagree with me, the only thing I ask is you tell me why. I'm always down to learn and always open to hearing a new opinion, so I hope I hear yours. While you're here, I would greatly appreciate if you can like and subscribe. Having just started out, every person makes a huge difference. Anyway, this has been Bardic, and I'll see you next time.